Hey, welcome back to another episode of Parker's Pensées. I'm your host, Parker Case, and this is a podcast where we explore all the deepest ideas in philosophy, theology, nature, and life. I love thinking about cool stuff, so come think with me. Today's episode is very, very special. I have with me Dr. Selmer Bringsjord, and we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, true AI, real AI, AGI, the existence of God, and how he's given an argument from AI for God. I'm really excited about this. Um, it's going to be awesome. If you guys like this podcast, please consider supporting me on Patreon or YouTube members. You can find the links in the description. But let's not do too much commodification today. Let's jump in with Selmer. There's so much good stuff that he has to say. So let me just pull him right in. Dr. Bringsjord, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
It's my pleasure, Parker. You might be overselling it. I'll do my best, man. This is quite the charitable lead in here. I don't know.
Well, I've been taking a deep dive into AI, and most of the folks that I've talked with, most of the folks that I've researched or gone to talks and listened to them, most of them have some sort of physicalist bias, or maybe not bias, maybe they have arguments for it, or like panpsychist view. So you have this different view, and you're an expert in it. So I'm just so jazzed to get a new perspective here on the podcast.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to share that point of view. I I really don't think it's for most of them anything other than a bias.
Mm.
I've always wondered, can you actually give a decent argument top to bottom for why, for example, you hold, not you personally, but this group, why you hold that people are thoroughly and completely physical things. It's pretty much hard to do that.
Yeah.
I think it's an assumption. Anyway, I tend to come at things and have my whole life from the theory first. And theory, in the case of the formal sciences, math and formal logic, which I'm most aligned with, tends to posit the existence, going back to Plato in this tradition, of things it's really hard to accept as physical. I don't think transfinite numbers are physical. I don't think algorithms are physical. If algorithms were physical, you could hit one with a hammer. That's really hard. The most you can do is an incarnation of an algorithm. And I think people are basically in the same category. You can incarnate them, you can embody them, and we have bodies.
Yeah, I love that, and I caught that from one of your talks that you said, "Look, I'm not, I don't believe in an immaterial realm just because of religious convictions first and foremost, but probably more so because of abstract objects like mathematical objects." I thought that was so cool. Um, before we get into some more nitty gritty, I'd love to introduce you to my audience a little bit more. You're a professor of cognitive science and the director, I think I'm getting this right, of the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, the AI and Reasoning Lab. Does that sound right?
That is correct. I have joint appointments in computer science where most of my PhD students over the last good number of years have come out of. And also, I have a joint appointment in the School of Management, the Lally School of Management at RPI. But yeah, my primary home, I think, financially somehow is cognitive science, and I'm happy about that. Tends to
Yeah.
be computational department, so it's really computational cognitive science. But yes,
That's awesome. Well, I know that you have some really great papers and you spend your time writing those, but this business about an AI lab, what do you do in the AI lab for folks who are more familiar with like philosophers of AI and stuff?
right, right. I decided maybe in 81 or 80, shortly after I was exposed to some arguments from philosophers of AI claiming that no machine could be intelligent or no machine could understand that. I was never going to espouse any of those views unless I myself knew top to bottom what was going on in AI. And the only way I could really do that was to start studying AI,
Hmm.
which I did. So since that time, I've been doing that very seriously. And the lab is really an outgrowth of that commitment. I want to try to build with collaborators intelligent machines so that if I say something negative or I say something limitative, about those machines, no one will be able to say, "Yeah, but you're really just a philosopher. I'm not sure you know how machines work." No, I actually know how, at least I don't know how chips work top to bottom, but I know how things work in AI. And really, I want to combine philosophy and deep questions about AI with doing real AI. And
Mm.
that's my modus operandi.
See, I love that. That's so good because a lot of the AI skeptics I know are philosophers, and they go, "Hey, look, Ned Block solved this with the Chinese nation, and John Searle solved it with Chinese room. It's done." And then some of my other friends on the other side will say, "Well, you that's so old. That's old hat. That's from the '80s. No one talks about that anymore. You don't understand what's going on in the lab." So I love that you can straddle both, and you have the technical knowledge and the philosophical acumen. That's why I'm so excited about you, man.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I still remember the day I opened the textbook for Intro to AI at Brown University and saw that at that point, the textbook from Charniak and McDermott was all based on, pretty much at that time, AI was a very small field intellectually. It was all based on logic, and which I had studied quite a bit and intended to keep studying. And so that was an amazing experience. And yeah, I stuck with it.
Yeah. Well, that I believe I bought that book because you mentioned it before. It's coming in the mail, I think. But the logic point is one I really wanted to touch on. I think this is kind of a pejorative term now. At least folks like my friend Ben Gertzel will not like this term, but GoFi, good old fashioned AI, seems to it's a in my head it's a big emphasis on logic, and that's how we're going to solve AI because that's what's most important to thinking or to human cognition. Can you help us out with like GoFi and maybe connectionism to help the audience understand these
Yeah.
concepts?
Uh, you're pretty much right about the pejorative aspect of the acronym GoFi. That, and by the way, that's what it stands for. It is a pejorative term, but it probably wasn't as explicitly connected to formal logic as some might think at this point. Certainly, symbolic information and processing over it was a huge part of it, but uh, an emphasis on formal computational logic was there, a strong part of GoFi. And you're right to mention connectionism. And regardless of how we slice and dice those uh, elements of the GoFi thing, connectionism was and continues to be in its modern 21st century incarnations radically different because the fundamental representation scheme is entirely numerical and is a neural network. So you have on the one, and this has never changed. These two horses
Yeah.
have been running, and we don't have anything else. Too. It's like, well, where's the third thing? There really isn't a third thing.
What
So,
about a life? Would I could see
oh,
someone saying that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Someone would have to convince me that the underlying math is not, is not reducible at some point to either some collection of formal logics and associated machinery for reasoning, uh, or an artificial neural network. Now there are exotic aspects, exotic kinds of things saddled up on both horses,
Mhm,
but I'm not sure if one were to say, "Well, I want to bring some machine to genuine life." This has been said. I find that actually a much more sensible, believe it or not, objective. I want to build a frog. I want to build an artificial, creature that's definitely alive. But I'm not so sure about all this other fancy stuff that people are talking about, including perhaps consciousness. I don't know, but
mhm.
no higher level cognition per se. Um, it, I think it would be hard to do that without eventually getting pegged as using something in either of these two, let's say, tents or clusters of formalism. So it would be really hard. And today, it's really just the same thing all over again now. We have the attacks on deep learning
Mhm,
coming from the reasoning people pointing out they can't, none of these large language models can reason at the level of, intro to logic. Uh, why is that? Well, regardless, they're attacking artificial neural networks, processing information in the case of something like GPT-4, going forward only in the neural network, and it's a neural network. It's a neural network based approach, and very different than using formal logic to handle reasoning. That's why it has so many problems.
Yeah. Well, I found that, I in trying to get a grasp on a new topic, I like to look at the history of the topic, and so going back to, like, the 1950s or whenever the AI first AI conference was when they coined the term. Uh, it's just so fascinating to see these 2 players, and they're back and forth, they're writing against each other in the papers, they're losing funding, and it seems like the Go-Fi folks are kind of, beating up on the connectionist folks, and then you look at today, and it looks like the neural net guys are winning with ChatGPT and with
Yeah.
some of the larger models. It looks like they won, but I don't know, you have a better inside, grasp on it. Are they still, jockeying for position here?
There isn't much jockeying in certain quarters of the technologized part of our planet because this is almost absolute dominance in the case of transformers and large language models. Like,
Yeah.
Microsoft's a pretty big company. Now, the odd thing about Microsoft and OpenAI is that Microsoft previously and still does invest in, could call it GoFi, but SMT solvers are logic based animals.
Are they
And
expert systems?
well, expert systems were definitely all expressible and usable ultimately engineering wise in terms of computational logic, but that's long dead because of an underestimation of human expertise, which by the way, that's happening again.
Yeah.
So now we have people saying, "Oh, everybody's going to lose their jobs." I mean, we'll displace white collar workers. And I've had some great conversations with my son about this, who was in the business world after college for 10 straight years. Like, hey, Alexander, you're reading this stuff. Can you just actually show me or tell me one white collar job that could actually be done by GPT-4? I mean, I'm not really sure, but the claim about expertise being machinable and being replaceable with AI is happening all over again in my lifetime. Obviously,
Yeah.
not a young person. It's the same thing. I remember people saying, "That's it. Radiologists, they make a fortune. They're going to be out of a job. AI can just destroy them." And we're still wrestling with this. They can read the scans better. Well, I don't know. Last time I looked, the people I'm dealing with in emergency medicine end up getting, x-rays and other things examined by human radiologists. Maybe the AIs are playing a role in it. But that's
Mm.
happening again. But, you have CEOs of companies with probably something to gain saying, yeah, I think about, 40% of white collar jobs will be done by large language models. Well, I don't know. We'll see. Right
Does it
now,
does it seem like there always have to be, an expert human in the loop then?
well, I would say mathematically, that's probably a theorem for one reason only: perception.
Okay.
So perception. Well, look, use I use ChatGPT all the time. I have tons of sessions. It's great. It's fun. It's fun to trounce and uh, outthink and so forth,
Yeah.
and then save the transcripts. But when you do that, is it seeing your face? Like I'm looking at your face right now. By
Mm.
the way, you're you're quite an attractive. I mean, this is
Thanks,
I
man.
feel also ancient because you're so youthful. But
I
what
appreciate
can I
that.
do? They can't see you. They can't perceive anything. Oh, think of what it would be like to go to work, okay, in your fine white collar job. I mean, what are you doing? What are you doing with a perception? I don't know. I think everybody assumes there'll be some direct information feeds for these machines. I suppose.
Mhm.
I don't know where it's all going to be digital directly in because we don't have perception. We don't have attention and perception. And one of my um, closest colleagues and former student, Paul Bellows, an expert on computational attention and perception, we're nowhere. We're absolutely nowhere. So I like to give demos in my class where I do some task right at the podium that's physical, also involves reasoning, physical and involves some reasoning to solve a problem. Okay. Where I have to attend to some items on the podium, perceive them, and then I have to do fine manipulation. So that's the third thing that these machines, we are nowhere in the area of fine manipulation within robotics, making progress. So I'm not sure. Those are some of the problems.
Yeah.
And you could make this. I said it was mathematical, and I think I think you can easily show that this is the case because if you define high level cognition at a high level of intelligence so that it includes a capacity for attention, shifting attention, perceiving and manipulation, well, then you'll have a low intelligence machine when you're talking about something like GPT-4.
Hmm. That's a really good point. Yeah, including more like phenomena going on there. I I I'm very susceptible to the headlines, just like other folks who are outside looking in. And I thought with the that 2017 paper, "Attention's All You Need," I thought like the transformer model. I thought they got attention. They don't have it yet.
Well, there's attention in internal senses, and one of my colleagues is working and making great progress on using attention in internal processing or an internal attention sense,
Hmm.
but clearly solving attention as it is modulated, directed, redirected in a scene that is perceived, where the scene is physical in the
Hmm.
environment, that is non-existent.
Okay.
It's non-existent. If it weren't non-existent, then the companies who would love to have a cognitive robot able to negotiate environments quickly and efficiently would just show us how to do that. And
Hmm.
DARPA's run contests with the best such groups in the world. Just getting a robot to be put down in an arbitrary environment with an arbitrary door, get to the door and open it when it's not a door that they've been trained to open before. And there are a lot of doors, a lot of door types,
Yeah.
is not currently not possible.
Okay.
Currently not possible. And one of the examples that my one of my PhD students, John Jack, is working on, I'll give you an example from emergency medicine. Just consider the problem of taking capillary refill. God forbid, you break your wrist or your arm and you have to be splinted. They come and split your arm. Before they splint you, they got to make sure that you have circulation or there resort to something else. After they split your arm, they will squeeze one of your fingertips and observe, hey, do we still have good circulation here? If not, we're gonna have to resplint, generally speaking.
Mhm.
And the problem of building a robot able to splint an arm with a random break and then take capillary refill with fingers in the robot and see it and make a decision. We do not have any systems able to do that in the world today. Any robots that can do that. You don't want to break the finger. You have to have tactile sensors in the fingertips. It goes on and on. It's
Mm.
very difficult.
Yeah. Well, I meant to ask this earlier, but I'm going to jump back to it. So sorry for the whiplash, but I can imagine when you first started getting into AI that there were some folks who thought you shouldn't do this because it was a dead end or something like that. Today it would be, it'd make a lot of money. It's profitable. Go start a business and then you can sell it to one of the big companies. But were there a lot of naysayers when you told people, "Hey, I'm going to go study AI"?
Well, in philosophy, technical philosophy, and in logic, certainly
Mm.
that's the case. But yeah, I had a really good advisor in Roderick Chisholm, now obviously deceased, who was capable of impelling me to carry out some meta reasoning about areas of specialization that would make sense and not make sense. And I think the minute he heard that I not only liked logic, but that I liked computation, he started thinking about the mind and AI. And I was like, well, I never taken any AI. They say, well, you consider it. And I considered it. I said, that's what I'm going to do, Professor Chisholm. And, that is, for better or worse. Others will have to judge what I
Yeah.
did.
It all makes sense now. I know I like you. I love Chisholm. I love Chisholm students, and that makes a lot of sense. I had no idea until you just said that. That's awesome, man. What a legend that guy is, and the legacy he's left. That's
Right,
insane.
right. Well, I remember his one he had a yeah, so I told him he said, "Well, what are some of your what would you like you have some ideas for areas of specialization?" I said, "Well, yes, I do. I do. Formal logic, if I could build a bridge between formal logic, and some of the things that epistemology, but if I was formal logic and that, and then he said, well, you could do that. Um, you might not get a job in so many words in his,
Mm.
jo-" I said, okay, well, what would happen if I just did formal logic? And I remember him through his glasses, he just looked at me and he, don't know if it's verbatim. He said, "Yeah, the second idea you have is actually worse than the first."
That's great.
That was the end of that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, okay, so it makes sense, yeah, why you have emphasized logic so much and can use that so well. That's really cool. I wanted to get just just a grasp on some of the terms that people use today. Maybe we could talk about like strong AI, weak AI, narrow AI, real AI, AGI. Can you give us a taxonomy of the AIs on offer, I guess?
I can give you such a thing. It might not be accurate
Yeah.
primarily because at this point, I'm acutely frustrated. It is dynamic and continuous. I just saw something, I believe, from the National Science Foundation where they're using strong AI um, as sort of uh, nothing like what it originally meant, which
Yeah.
was you have to target consciousness and say, literally, you're going to build a computing machine that is subjectively aware and has full blown consciousness in that sense, a sense of inner feeling that you're well acquainted with also through philosophy. It used to mean that. Then the opposite side, weak AI would be no, 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 no. That's I don't want to deal with that problem. So I'll just go with behavior.
Yeah.
And that always made sense to me because then I was able to say, so that's the original distinction. Weak AI in terms of the taxonomy. Weak AI, build a machine that by all behavioral indicators is intelligent, but might not literally be conscious, etc.
Mhm.
And then strong AI, well, yeah, the whole 9 yards behaviorally, and it's conscious. And that allowed me for a long time. My friend Bill Rappaport still knows me as this in terms of the labels. Strong, weak AI. So you just combine both adjectives, and that had great meaning because you would say that is someone who says, yeah, but the behavior, courtesy of exquisite engineering as we go forward, can get so amazing that we'll not be able to tell the difference between a human person
Mm.
and one of these machines. They would be androids, clearly.
Yeah.
And that made sense. Now, weak AI means something like you're not trying to cover the whole gamut of intelligence at the human level. And then strong would be something roughly aligned with AGI, artificial general intelligence, which would mean no, 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 no. We're going to strive to cover in replication everything that a human can do. Or I prefer human level because of some formalisms and hierarchies abstract away from talking whether we're talking about humans or whether we're talking about machines or whether we're talking about aliens or whether we're talking about, angels, it doesn't matter. We got to have in my opinion, we have to have a formal way of measuring. So that takes care of old weak, old strong, strong weak, new weak, which is synonymous roughly with narrow
Yeah.
AI. Would be, well, we won't cover all these like a transformer. Right?
Mhm.
So chatting or drawing digital images off of the correlation that we have in the data between images and text, that would be that would be exceedingly narrow. AI. What I was talking about before, where let's say the robot can start talking to you about the injury that it's dealing with. You're there as a human paramedic, and then it solves the problem top to bottom. That's probably an AI. There's another term for you here, an AI complete uh, uh, performance, because an AI complete problem would be roughly analogous to the use of hyphen complete in parts of computer science. If you say that something is dash complete, you mean, well, success on this problem would allow you so much leverage that you could basically say you've got the whole thing solved, and
Yeah.
then you can reapply elsewhere the progress that you. So I don't know if I've covered all of them. Shoot one at me that
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's really helpful. I wonder about, the G in AGI, because, some people look at ChatGPT or GPT-4, however we're talking about it, and they say, "Well, look at the training set. It's like everything on the web." And so if that's not general, it can do this, it can do the bar exam, it can do this, it can generalize, it looks like. If that's not general, if that's not AGI, then what is? And then others, I think Gertzel would say, like, it has to go beyond its training set, or it needs to be able to make this leap into the unknown, and use some continental philosophy language, which scares me and freaks me out. But I'm confused on the G.
I I will try to help, but might not. Uh, I've known Ben for a long time. Uh, I have not spent as much time with him as I would like. Uh, I have grown to realize that Ben is not only well, okay, everybody in this game. So he's brilliant, but the problem that I think a lot of people have is they're kind of short on wisdom
Hmm,
in intellectual pursuits, including AI,
hmm,
and yeah, Ben is a wise person. So you combine those two things. Not saying he's right about everything. I
right.
many disagreements, but he is um he's wise.
Hmm,
So okay, back to your question about the data. Uh we know as a matter of relatively simple observation and math and logic that whatever the data is available that's being taken from the web and from the digitization. And then we have to have, of course, tokenization, vectorization, and matricization of all of this. It's all numerical. We know the data available far, far below capacity. So it can't work. I mean,
hmm,
this is not, it's amazing that you got to be careful because people who are naysayers on this basic, maybe they stand to make money by not admitting it.
uh,
So,
right.
here's a simple example. We know that mathematics itself requires third order logic to some degree. Okay.
Hmm,
We know this is an absolute fact. Information on the web that's declarative has generally been attacked by a tiny fragment of logics available that do not have the expressivity, even for the most part, of first order logic.
hmm,
So I would say, and everyone who knows the formal terrain that I've ever talked about this says, of course, that's right. I can't believe these people are getting carried away. Suppose someone says, yes, but I want a machine to compete with a genuine mathematician or logician out there. So I want them to reason at that level. Well, the problem is there's no data about how they reason at that level. The only thing we have are a few scant little things they produce when they publish it. You'd have to like get inside their minds and record what's happening. Look at their notebooks. Look at their mental image. You can't, the data's not there. And
hmm,
so we're being for higher level intelligence. I'm using math as an example. The data is not there. It can't be there. So now we have the problem. Well, is the data ever going to get there? Because if we want to do end to end deep learning, we need the data.
hmm,
This definition, what it is. Well, I don't see how. Okay. In the case of second order and higher order logic, what we have is data from the people who generally are doing this computationally, but they're not mathematicians. They're working on the machinery. They're not producing the data.
right.
Okay. that's
Yeah.
produced by actually doing it. It's like the difference between a great novelist, okay, and someone who says, "Hey, I figured out how to handle the syntax that gives you the allowable space of sentences if you're Marcel Proust. I figured out basically his syntax." Well, great, but he could have written another novel before or if he lived longer, he could have written another novel. So you don't have that data, right?
Hmm.
No. Does that matter? Well, yeah, that could really matter if you're doing deep learning. So this is a problem that I assume, in large measure, Ben fully appreciates. And I agree with him as well when he says, well, we need something to go beyond the data. That would be in the realm of what I've long talked about, along with others. That would be creativity. I mean, if creativity isn't by definition to go beyond available data in prior cases, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Now, some people have deflationary views of creativity as mere sort of problem solving, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that's kind of why we consider Proust to be a literary genius.
Yeah. You've talked about speed not getting us there, and about, how there's not, like, predictable, there's not antecedents of, like, Proust that could, predict Proust and stuff like that. Like, it looks like there's just kinda some fire of creativity that pops out of somewhere, but not, a predictable, determination or something like that.
Yeah, that would be my view. The person who has, as I say, a sort of deflationary view, um, a less elevated view of creativity would say, well, I don't know where it is, but somewhere out there, there's an antecedent, to use your term, for Proust. By the way, I've used Proust. I love to use Proust
I've
because
noticed that.
I've been reading Proust and studying Proust as a hobby since I was just out of high school. And you know what? Last time, I'm not going to give any names. I'm just going to say, I was at a cocktail party. As the scholar there from the humanities, he said, "Well, this great thing about this AI thing is, there really isn't anything new. All fiction is just recasting previous stuff. So I'm pretty sure this is going to work for allowing us to have machines that create amazing fiction." And I said, "Well, do you mind if I propose a counterexample? Because you can correct me on the spot, and then I'll go away humble. What's the antecedent to Marcel Proust exactly?" 499 word sentence that not only is perfectly coherent, but advances the narrative. Nothing.
Yeah.
Never seen it. Maybe somebody in the audience or send me an email. Love to see it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, okay, so another thing that I think that I've picked up on in AI, in the history of AI, is that there's like, there's twin or dual goals of AI theorists and, builders. Mapping the mind and mimicking the mind. Some folks are like, we want to figure out, maybe we'll backfill, maybe we'll back propagate, our own human brain or human mind once we make this AGI or something that's human level. And the others are like, all right, who cares? Let's produce the same products that the human produces. I
Yeah.
wonder. So it sounded like when we were talking about AGI more, it sounded like, you make this really great point often about mathematical precision. You made this point when it comes to uploading your, mind into a computer. It's like, well, give me a mathematical precise definition of uploadable before I sign on to this. And it's such a hard nosed point because everyone else is dreaming, and you're like, no, let's get back down to earth and let's get mathematical on it. But I wonder if some folks might just go, fine, I don't, I'm not sure that I can give a mathematically precise definition of what a mathematician is doing in their head or in their mind, but this A
Right.
this AGI can produce the same product. So who cares if, getting really pragmatic about it. What would you say to that?
Well, honestly, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to figure this topic out sociologically and also sort it out in terms of some kind of breakdown, some kind of taxonomy in the people doing AI.
Mm,
Because on the one hand, so you're very right to put your finger on this. It's extremely murky. On the one hand, you have people who, if the going gets tough in debate with skeptics about AI, will say, paraphrasing, don't you really need to shut up? I mean, after all, what else are we? Look at our brains, they are neural networks. So, and that's us. Okay, that's an appeal to we've already got the essence of what we are covered, and we're going to exploit that we do through artificial neural networks. Okay. But then you have people who, when the going gets tough, will say, "Oh, gee, well, I'm happy that you're skeptical, but you see, the problem is if you check back with me in 3 years, why don't you just do that? Just call me back. I won't call you. You call me back in 3 years and tell me whether this got knocked down or not. I'm pretty sure it'll be knocked down."
Hmm,
So those are the behavior focused people who are just so that they're not appealing to some essentially metaphysical reality or metaphysical alignment between what we are at a deep level and what we already have computationally. They're just saying, I trust the engineering. It's going along reasonably well. AI is the phrase I hear all the time. AI is a young field.
hmm.
Totally untrue. 50
Yeah.
56 is the modern, you know, I think we need to check our history books. I think Leibniz was, for example, thinking really rigorously about whether the mind could be computational, top to bottom. So I have not sorted out sort of this difference in modern AI and computational cognitive science. It's very much there.
Hmm,
By the way, I think a problem for the first camp in terms of brain science and specifically computational neuroscience is that that's fungible too, right?
hmm.
It's not like our brains are set. Maybe they currently are, but I don't think we're going to stop with Apple goggles and the Apple headset. We're going directly into the brain. We're going to start monkeying around with the brain. The essence of what we are has really, for practical reasons, uh, ultimately, I think if we're honest, little to do current with what we currently have for neural hardware. And
Hmm.
of course, in my case, I don't think the essence of what we are corresponds to neural hardware. I think we use this hardware just like I can use a fork.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well, Dr. Bringsjord, would you stand behind the label of substance dualist then?
Yeah, I'm very definitely I'm property dualism is really hard if one is honest and understands what that means. Um, I think it's really hard to deny property dualism in the mind.
Hmm,
And I mean, the the mental property of perceiving that Parker perceives Selmer and so forth, um, is that physical?
mhm.
If it is, I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to be not just correlated with the brain state, but identified with the brain state. Ain't gonna work. Possible. And many people have it's just outside of philosophy, especially outside of sort of, modern analytic philosophy, people still have no idea uh, about the difficulties associated with maintaining the denial of property dualism. But I am a substance dualist, and I really start with the fact, going back to what we talked about almost at the beginning. I think there really is um, for example, I really think there is a thing called quicksort. So I think there is an algorithm. I think I might be wrong. Tony Hoare, I always get that. I think he discovered quicksort, how to sort, n arbitrary numbers with remarkable efficiency using this algorithm. So
Hmm,
in goes the jumbled numbers, out comes the sorted list of them. Um, okay, now what is that thing, quicksort? It's a real thing because if someone gets it, understands it, they can then write down a unique inscription to denote it.
yeah.
So I find it impossible not to be, if you will, some kind of, and I'm using the adjective substance dualist in the case of what I call logico mathematical objects, and other people have called them such.
Yeah.
Now, all right, people, yeah, I believe that they're non physical. Do they have Do they have bodies? Of course they have bodies. They use their bodies. What is the thing that would persist if their body's destroyed and they get a new body, or they get an improved body, or a new part of their body? Well, people, I suppose, have called that a soul. I would just say, Chisholm talked about this. So, well, if we're going with the soul stuff in philosophy, maybe theology is okay. But if we're doing that in philosophy, now we have souls, minds, bodies, people. That seems like too many categories.
Yeah.
So I would just say people are non-physical, or persons are non-physical, and they have bodies.
Yeah.
And if they lose their bodies, they can persist, which, by the way, is a problem that Leibniz worked on quite a bit, because he had all these people. You may know this. A lot of religious believers in the Christian tradition freaking out about the fact that if their bodies decayed, the atoms in their bodies would be distributed all over. And how could they come, you know, and Leibniz had to basically, paternalistically explain. Well, you see, if we just make a few assumptions about the nature of what a person is, we can work this out.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a substance dualist. We are not physical things.
That's awesome. Yeah, me too. I've had a lot of substance dualist propaganda on the show, or really good arguments actually. But real quick, just jumping back to quicksort, I think you mentioned. I think you already explained this, but do you think that quicksort was an abstract object that existed eternally, or was it like a is it like an impure abstracta that was like not quite on par with like the form of a triangle or abstract propositions, but was somehow like still created or it has different existence conditions or something, I guess.
Yeah, no, great question. One of the fundamental questions in the in this space. Yeah, no, it wasn't creation. If it was for, we should Google it. At the moment, it was pre-existing, and in my opinion, and he discovered it.
Okay.
I would say the same thing about the number uh, 7.
Yeah.
You know, the number we can have constructions that make a lot of sense formally, so that we don't end up in trouble in logic and mathematics. We can construct 7. We can have a set theoretic approach, etc. But the number 7 itself that guided us all along, we knew where we wanted to get to when we
Yeah.
are doing that. So the whole thing is long been, a bit hysterical to some philosophers of mine. It's like, well, yeah, those formalists, doing their thing. They got a theory of numbers and where they come from. But the thing is, didn't they have a grasp of the number before they did that? So I'm a little curious of that.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Well, I wonder what you would make of, and we don't have to stick on this too long, but what do you make of like the story, The Lord of the Rings? Like, is that on par? Do you think Tolkien discovered that story, or did he invent it? I guess because now we're at the intersection
that's
of creativity and discovery.
right. Yeah, I would say that's different,
Okay.
and it's not going to be any different in the practice of logic and mathematics. I'm not going to say across the board that everything was discovered.
Okay.
Um, but I am going to say that about quicksort. In Lord of the Rings, I'm going to say that is analogous to that is a kind of creativity, extreme literary creativity. I would say that's roughly analogous to divine creativity.
Hmm.
Now, are some of the elements indeed discovered and pre-existing? Sure, but overall, um, I would say that's different. So I would say a lot of what Hoare did is very different than just discovering, quicksort. I think there's some kind of unbelievably complex, don't know whether we'll ever penetrate it in science, maybe we will, thing going on when people are both, um, sufficiently intelligent, uh, highly creative, and persistent and detail oriented. Though
Mm.
when you put those three things together, you can end up with, um, for me, things that are way beyond discovery and boom, it's done. Uh, and even when the discovery happens, persistence and um, this detail oriented mindset is required to specify it in communication. Or could have said, gee, I got it. It's in my mind. Now I'm going on vacation. But fortunately, uh, some gifted people don't do that
Yeah,
and share it. And technology arrives and the world in that, at least in that sense, gets better.
that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear you say that you think Tolkien's authorship is roughly analogous to God's, or the creativity therein. I wrote my master's thesis defending that point, so I knew I'd like you, man. This is awesome. I wanted to talk a little bit about God because I've heard in several talks you mentioned you're a Christian. I'm a Christian as well, so that's awesome. And you also have this argument from AI to God, and it's different than other arguments that use AI to corroborate different mathematical systems or use Gödel or whatever. But this is
Right.
from AI to God. This is a big thing. I mean, it's a whole huge paper. It's really technical and stuff. But I wonder if you could just give us a characterization of it. I'll link to the paper so my listeners can read it themselves. But yeah, can you help us with it?
I can try. Yeah, I would say first, I have to give credit to folks in Romania where I love Romania. And my time in Romania and conversations there with folks and thinking about a lot of things there plays a role in this argument. And
Hmm,
it might not be an argument that anybody who knows, but I have to say that first. And they know who they are. By the way, I'm not in the narrow sense. I'm not an Orthodox Christian. I'm an Orthodox Christian, but I'm not part of the Orthodox Church.
sure.
It's tricky, right? And Romania generally has a very strong um, presence there for that. But the argument really distills to one simple assertion, and that is that what we're seeing happen before our eyes in the advance of AI, in my opinion, is the construction of hunter gatherers 200,000 years ago, 250, whatever it is, doing what they did at the time that did not require higher level didn't need analysis. You didn't need the calculus
Hmm,
from Leibniz and Newton to go pick berries and hunt down game.
hmm,
Teamwork, sure. I got the social thing, and that's what people. But you didn't need the calculus. You need the calculus to send a rocket ship up to do anything sensible without just showing off or trying to get attention, trying to get the attention of investors. So there's something very odd going on then. And if this is what AI is really doing, is producing a robot that can operate, okay, at the observable level of a hunter gatherer, we do have a bit of a problem.
hmm.
Um, where's the rest of it? Where did the rest of it come from? And this is what divided Darwin and Wallace originally, both co-discoverers of evolution by mutation and natural selection. So that's really where I start. And I'm demanding an explanation for the acute limitation of AI in this regard. And somebody might say, "Oh no, we've got the higher level." Well, I don't know about that.
Mhm.
I think you're getting communication, and boy, did those hunter gatherers need to communicate. I'm just not seeing the stuff that has been essentially a theme in our conversation, which is the best of what we do, the best of what our technology is based on. It's been collaboration and cooperation to produce those rocket ships. But, we got to take this amazing dimension in human mentation seriously. And I think if we take it seriously, we have trouble explaining it. And AI is not explaining it. AI is doing the opposite. AI
Hmm.
is producing for us a very difficult question. This is what we can get. This is the level we can get. And hopefully, the robotics problems I mentioned before are all worked out. You have to be able to throw a spear and things like that. We can't do that. But I believe we're going to get there. Um, but we show no progress against the amazing gifts that humans have, and consciousness is one of them,
Hmm.
and a big one. We're not making any progress toward uh, yeah, producing a machine that leverages the fact that not only has consciousness, but leverages that, exploits that it's conscious to get things done.
Mm.
We don't have that. We're just nobody even working on it because we have no formal description, no third person formal description of what subjective awareness or phenomenal consciousness is. We got the same problem there. So AI keeps advancing and advancing and advancing, but it's placing before us this question. And I start with that question and look at the possible explanations for it, and there ain't too many. You got Stephen Jay Gould saying, "Well, it was a stray mutation in
Mhm.
our case, and it sat dormant for 200,000 years." Mm, that seems fairly ad hoc to me. That seems like that conforms to actually the fallacy of ad hoc reason, but that's okay. He was otherwise brilliant.
Mhm.
That's really where it starts, and the argument proceeds from there. And that's why I call it the argument from AI.
I love that, and it's targeting that partially it's targeting the notion that the rising tide lifts all ships, and so where we once started with flint axes, that got us to calculus because this overproduction in our capacities through our frontal cortex growing, or maybe we took mushrooms. I hear that one on the Joe Rogan podcast all the time, the stoned ape theory, and it's just like, man, I don't see it. So what I appreciate about your argument is that it has some similarities to Plantinga's evolutionary argument against naturalism, or Tom Crisp's take on that, where he limits it to like abstruse metaphysical theories, which would include naturalism itself. But um,
Yeah, yeah,
AI is
yeah, yeah,
showing that AI is just it's like a practical example of that, where it's like, look, you guys, look at this AI. Look what it doesn't need to be conscious to do this stuff. So then why, if it can do it without consciousness, why would we ever evolve consciousness? If where's the rising tide lifting them to consciousness, or to abstruse metaphysical beliefs, or to modal logic on its own, or whatever the case?
yeah, yeah. Correct. And we have a fundamental dividing line.
Mm,
We know that AI is based on what a Turing machine can do and nothing more maximally. Okay. This is the basis of AI mathematically and in
mm,
theoretical computer science. So all we need is very good reason to hold. I claim it's provable. Very good reason to hold that much of what we do requires information processing beyond a Turing machine,
mhm,
then everything falls into place very quickly. You have an immediate problem with evolution as it's usually defined because it is, look at Dennett. He bragged about the fact that evolution is an algorithm. It's a Turing level process. Yeah, big problem, Dan. There's a theorem right out of the box when you take your first comp sci class that has any theory. One machine at level L cannot produce another machine at level L prime, where L prime is more powerful than L. So how the heck would it be that we'd have this capacity? And then you have the theological implications immediately, because where would this capacity have come from otherwise? So yeah, I do see an affinity with those with the folks that you mentioned very much.
yeah,
Uh, I do think for me, it's all going to distill to the hierarchy that I'm implicitly referring to. You can do it computationally. You can also do it just in terms of formal logic, just in terms of being able to answer. You alluded to modal logic, being able to answer queries regarding information expressed in a logic as the logic gets more and more expressive.
mhm,
Okay, and as the query gets harder and harder, that almost immediately takes you into the realm beyond what AI is. Okay, this is, I remember was it Marvin Minsky years ago. I was just a young guy. He's giving a talk in Boston. He's, like, I raised my hand and say, well, why don't you draw a box? If we draw a box and we're talking about all the functions from the natural numbers to the natural numbers, you're really going to tell me that we're leaving aside all the functions that are uncomputable? So
Hmm.
it's really just a microscopically thin part of the box, and that's what you think we are. And though we discovered the entire box and we charted the whole space. So anyway, you're right, but I'm getting close to the witching hour here.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, that's a great place to stop. I'd love to have you back on. There's, some questions about
Oh yeah, yeah,
hypercomputation.
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, right, and we're getting right there. Maybe we could pick that up next time. But you had this great line about Gödel's incompleteness, showing that it's a math. The singularity is a mathematical impossibility. I'd love to talk about that. Thanks so much for your time, Dr. Bringsjord. This has been fantastic. Please come back on and school us some more on AI.
Parker, it's a pleasure having been here with you. Thanks for the great questions. And yes, indeed, I look forward to chapter 2.
Awesome. Well, folks, that's gonna have to do it for us for now. This has been Parker's Pensées, and as always, all glory to God.